You're listening to the Navigating Leadership Podcast, a podcast where you get to sit in on conversations I'm blessed to have with leaders from around the country and right here at home. I'm Dave Freund, and welcome. This week, Marisa returns as we unpack my conversation with Dr. Timothy Elmore. Let's join the conversation and see what her takeaways might have been. Marisa, how are you this week?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm good. This is actually I think this is officially our third podcast, but it's the second one we did.
Mm-hmm.
So did you get a chance to listen to my interview with Tim Elmore?
I did. It was funny because I got the notification that a new podcast came out, and it was kind of like, being on the other side of it, which was nice.
You just have the excitement of like, ooh, I don't know what this is all about, so I get to log in and listen.
Exactly.
So what were your general thoughts?
So, luckily it wasn't a totally new topic for me because I did see his address at the Live to Lead. How many years ago was that? Was that 2022?
I think 2022.
Yeah. So I did get to see that and kind of actually, visually see it, which I think is a different experience, right? Because
right.
Tim Elmore is very animated in his speaking, which you could definitely hear in the interview. So I did have a little bit of background, but it was certainly a really good refresher, and enjoyed some of the examples that he shared with you, and I could tell that you both enjoyed the interview a lot, and
we did. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, and it did get me thinking about the topic again because, like I said, the first time I heard it was 2022, but you just reminded me that we have also talked about this topic years ago. I want to say that probably like 2018, 2019, you reminded me of a conversation. Right. And I think that as a millennial, I guess we should probably self-identify, right? So I'm a millennial in this conversation.
And I'm a boomer.
And you are a boomer.
I'm a boomer for sure.
That this was, especially when, a couple of years ago when this topic kind of came to light again, at first it was kind of, challenging because up until now, the millennials were catching a lot of shade.
Yeah.
I specifically remember having a conversation over dinner at my parents' home with a very close friend of my parents who I've known my entire life. And he is a very, very funny guy. But he had a lot of opinions on millennials, and I gave it all right back to him over dinner one night. And so, it was kind of funny because now I finally feel like the attention is off the millennials and
right.
And on to Gen Z. So it was, kind of, I came at it from less of a defensive place. I was more willing to hear, but I enjoyed it. And I guess before I say too much, maybe we should recap a little bit of do you think that makes the most sense? Or do you want to just jump right in?
Well, I can recap it pretty quick. So I know Tim Elmore from the Maxwell leadership side. He was actually mentored by John Maxwell when he was right out of college. So we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, he actually was with John when John was formulating what became the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. So as John is kind of fleshing out his ideas, Tim's there, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tim wrote, there was another book that Tim wrote called The 8 Paradigms of Leadership, which I had read. And then he came out with a new kind of diversity, which was the generations in the workplace. So we had talked about that. We talked about, and kind of a little bit of blending of the two books at one point. But what I really wanted to find out from him was, how did he write the book? Where did he get his research from? And then I really wanted to get some specifics from him on what are some keys to, and I hate the word leveraging, because it's not coping. I really believe
it's navigating, right? Like
navigating. Navigating leadership, right?
Yeah.
Navigating and maximizing the potential of millennials and Gen Zs. And my reason for focusing on that is because millennials and Gen Zs are the majority of the workplace right now. And so the book walks you through everything in it, but for the most part, that's really what we were focusing on. And, maybe I can just give folks just really, really quick the years of the generations. So the builders, otherwise known as the silent generation, were those born between 1929 and 1945. Boomers were 1946 to 1964. Gen Xers, which actually started out being called Busters, but they didn't think that was quite a good title, so they called them Gen Xers. They were 1965 to 1982. And then you folks, the millennials, 1983 to 2000. And Gen Zs are 2001 to 2018.
See, that's interesting. That's interesting. 2018, because I feel like it depends on who your source is, because that puts two of my children, which I thought were
Gen Zs,
which I have recognized them as the Gen Alpha or whatever.
Right.
I thought it was 20, like.
It could be.
Yeah, because that's like a 17-year span for Gen Z. Huh. Right. I've definitely found different sources, where they split the age. I'll have to revisit that.
Yeah, and I think the key for right now is in the workplace. I mean, I'm not worried about Gen Alpha, and to be honest with you, I'll probably be retired when Gen Alphas get to the workplace. But primarily with Tim, it was millennials and Gen Zs, otherwise known as Homelanders, which I had never heard of before.
For Gen Z? For Gen Zs. Interesting.
I don't know where that comes from, but anyways.
So now,
but that was one of his titles.
Do you think that is it that you think the book came out of this need to connect with millennials or Gen Z, or are you saying that your lens on it was particularly for those two generations?
That was my focus.
Okay.
The book was just to really navigate and maximize all the generations in the workplace. And Tim is also, he has a company called Growing Leaders that he started in 2003, I believe. So he focuses more on young people anyways, which I thought was great. And so he had so many great stories about interacting with young people. And you can tell when you're around him, he just loves young people, which would really make it fun if you were a young person working for him. So that was kind of the purpose of the podcast was, hey, how'd you write the book? And help me navigate myself through some of these leadership points, which I thought was really neat. And, his goal is we need to build bridges, not walls. So how do we do that? And the point is really understanding and valuing these various generations.
Yeah.
So, did you disagree with any of his assessments?
Did I disagree? Not really. There were some things that I just thought, like that might not apply to me, but I could see how it would be applicable.
Right.
So no, I don't think I disagreed. I think for me looking at it, I think that it's like any type of assessment or tool. It's one dimension of
right.
We are all multifaceted and influenced by many types of things. So when, I shared with you before we started recording that I spent some time again thinking about it last night. And while I think that there's certainly a lot of validity and things that I agree with what he said, I think it's one part of the whole picture, right? So thinking about myself as a millennial, and then thinking about where my husband fall. I think as millennials go, I'm pretty in the middle of those years. My husband falls on one end, my sister falls on another. I obviously know a lot of millennials, right? A lot of peers. And when I thought about kind of the assessment that Dr. Elmore made and the people in my life, I thought that there's a piece missing, which would be kind of phase of life.
Yes.
And the way I looked at it specifically was like I might have a different lens on certain things than my peers because I have 3 young children, whereas my sister does not. Or,
Yep.
I have friends who, while they are older than me, don't have children as well. So it's not necessarily like an age thing, but just kind of a phase of life.
Right.
And then I kind of started thinking about how that could apply to the other generations, right? And you could be a boomer that is happily cruising towards retirement. You could be a boomer who's caring for aging parents. You could be a boomer who is caring for aging parents and also supporting your children as they enter parenthood. Like there's a lot of those types of factors and influences that I think further fine tune your outlook and your lens on life, and certainly impact how you show up in the workplace. Among so many other things, right? I mean, my point is also a generalization too, but I think for me, it's really a reminder that which I think also kind of goes back to that dinner I described at the beginning of our podcast, is that we really can't make generalizations, but we can use these tools to learn and open our eyes to the differences among people, not even just among generations, but like among the people we work with, and try to look at them as an individual and say, the way they just behaved or what they just said to me wasn't what I expected, or wasn't, maybe I just didn't like it, or maybe I didn't find it appropriate. Why might they have said that? Instead of just thinking like, oh, they're a jerk, or like they can't help me, or they're no good around here. Like those aren't those jumping to those kinds of conclusions aren't what we need to do. What we need to do is say, why do they feel like that? Why do they act like that? And I think it's really helpful to understand the generational piece, but there could be more to it, right?
Absolutely. As you were describing the phase of life, it was like, wait, is she just thinking about my family right now? because my wife and I are caring for my aging parents at 92 and 93, to the point that my wife retired early from her job at the school so that she could be more available to help with my parents and our grandkids as need be at times. So so we're not at all cruising toward retirement, so to speak. Excuse me. And even for her, she might technically be retired, but she's not, going out to play pickleball, so to speak, is what sounds like
that's my new
are doing today.
That's my new habit. Or my new hobby. I was going to bring it up.
You're a pickleball player?
I am a pickleball player now. On Monday nights. And it was funny because I was going to bring that up because it gives me the opportunity to I am by far the youngest person there. And
I was going to say, that's not a millennial thing, is it?
Not yet, but I would love to make it one.
Okay.
But it's been really great to interact with new people.
Well, and I think that's the key that you brought out there. You're interacting with new people with an interest. One of the things I asked Tim, I said, Tim, is there anything that was common among all 5 of the generations that you interacted with? He goes, yes. He said all 5 had 3 things similar that they were looking for. One was that people would be humble, meaning that they would be open to outside perspectives and not think that they're the only right answer. Number 2 was that they could be respected, basically being honored by people that were different from them. And the last one was that people would be curious about them and have a hunger to learn and grow about their generation. And as I thought about that, I said, that just sounds like good leadership. If I really want to develop and as the best leader for my team, I finished some training today for one of our member companies who did an on-site 2 half days on the Ascend to Servant Leadership program, which all of these things blend together. Am I curious about them? Am I humble when I interact with them? And humility doesn't mean I think less of myself. It means I think more of others.
Mm-hmm.
So you still are very, very, you need to be a confident leader. But that humility piece is, I really would love to know your perspective on this.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to help me. And then I also noticed that Tim said this when he gave it. I said, well, can you give us some tips on how to lead millennials? And you'll remember what he said. He uses this A lead as kind of an acronym.
Mm-hmm.
And the A is ask their opinion. The L is listen to them, value them. E is empathize. And then if I've asked and I've listened and I've empathized, I've earned the right to share some guidance. And I thought, well, that's great for millennials, but it's great for any of them.
Mm-hmm.
So while I think it's good for us to understand some nuances, and maybe I'll call it that, nuances of the generations,
Mm-hmm.
there are some basic principles that we just need to keep holding true.
Mm-hmm.
I can't command. Now maybe this is where, and help me think this one through because I haven't thought it through yet. Maybe if we look at the attitude toward authority, the way Tim did his research was he had a ton of focus groups, and then he used a lot of Gallup's data and McKinsey's data, if I remember him right. And so the attitude toward authority, the builder generation was to respect them. The boomers generation was to replace them. That sounds kind of nasty. The Gen Xers was to endure them. Just, we'll make it through. Somehow I'll endure it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The millennials, he said, is to choose them. And Gen Z's is, I'm not sure I need them.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps boomers probably would have put up with bad leadership longer.
Mm-hmm.
Because sooner or later they'll be gone. Clearly, builder generations just accepted it. And they're like, they're to be respected, and you just don't. But then...
Well, the Gen X with the endure, right?
And Gen Xers was to endure them, yeah. And the boomers was, thank you for clarifying, if I wait long enough, I'll actually replace the bad leader, is what the boomer was thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the sad part for Gen Xers is they got stuck in the middle. They're the smallest number.
Mm-hmm.
And they got stuck in between boomers and millennials. And it's almost like, wait, don't we get a chance to lead at some point? Because a lot of the boomers weren't leaving quick enough. But I think the older people, older meaning like even myself and older, probably would have just, if we're told to do it, we do it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a good reason to do anything.
Right.
And I love the fact that younger people are saying, can you tell me why?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if I know that I have somebody that I need to give the why, I'm going to make better decisions. And I'm going to think it through more.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, the way I said that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the key. And I think looking at, so if I know that a millennial's view toward authority is to choose them, well, that's nothing new, because John Maxwell said people choose a leader before they buy into they buy into the leader before they buy into the vision.
Mm-hmm.
So he was seeing that, a generation ago when he was writing the 21 Laws.
Mm-hmm.
So what, if you're looking for a leader to follow, what do you look for? Who is a leader? What would be something you'd be looking for in terms of somebody that you think is worthy to follow?
I think humility, right? Which we just talked about.
Right.
I think I'd be looking for someone who understands the types of things that we are currently talking about, right? Who looks at people as individuals and can, extend empathy towards what, anyone could be going through.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, respect and trust.
Yeah.
Those would be like the
the
main things.
Perfect. Perfect. And I, the reason, and again, it wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't ask you a question you
Right,
didn't
that
know
I
was
wasn't
gonna
prepared
ask,
for.
right?
Uh-huh.
So you're not prepared for, but that's the authenticity of the podcast. If everything was scripted, nobody'd want to listen because it's too predictable. But my point in asking you that was, so for those of us that want to lead, whether we are a Gen Z, a millennial, an X, or a boomer that hasn't left yet, that's what the majority of the people in our workplace are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to live up to, because in my opinion, that's just simple good leadership.
Right. I mean, I think the worst thing that a leader can do is kind of expect everyone to be the same, or kind of do the whole this like my way or the highway type mentality,
Yes,
right? Because
yes,
not only is that painful for the other people involved, but what are you getting out of that? If everyone is thinking and doing the exact same thing, that's not the best and highest use of everyone's time and talent.
Right. You're going to make bad decisions.
Mm-hmm. You're
wasting
limiting
the people there.
Yeah,
you're limiting your team. Yeah. Exactly. There was something that I did want to run past you because I made a note here where there were 2 points. One that Tim said was everyone has a voice, but not everybody has a vote.
I had a feeling you'd bring this one up. And
so I want your perspective on that.
And so this one, I will say I struggled with it a little bit, and I'm still not totally sure. I know you asked me if there's anything I disagreed with, and I said no, because I haven't been able to fully think this through, because how do I say this? It almost felt like it was like a platitude. Like it was kind of just like a saying, almost like, did you use it because it flowed off the tongue well, or is that really the truth? Because I think in some ways, like a voice is a vote, or in some situations. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's my answer. Because I could see some people understanding that to be dismissive, or like a waste of someone's time, right? It's to say, I want to hear what you're going to say, but I don't care.
Okay.
So I don't know. I went back. I understand conceptually what he's trying to say, that it might not go your way, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Yes.
When I heard it as you have a voice but not a vote, it's like you can say it, but I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, okay. All right. So maybe a better way to put it was, I really value everyone's opinion, but in the end, there's times when a leader has to make a decision based on what they believe is best.
Like there are decision makers.
Right. Within a company.
Right. And so, anyone can try to influence that with their voice.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, that's how, that's the whole point of a decision. There's multiple ways it can go, and it can't go in everyone's favor.
Right.
But I think it was more kind of like, I could understand conceptually what he was trying to say, but maybe the words weren't quite what I would have chosen. Okay. I'm also very critical of word choice because of my background and grammar and editing. And I do know that not everyone thinks about it the way I do. So I am kind of hypersensitive to word choice. So we can give him that I might just be being overly critical, but.
Well, and I was hoping I was going to pick something that we would disagree on. So that's all. Because we want, that's one of the things that really was a bit of our goal, was so that our listeners could see that, you and I work really well together. I think we're good friends. I truly value you. You're part of my inner circle. But that doesn't mean we agree on everything. And if we did, that would be a problem because that means we don't have that extra perspective that's there.
Right.
Another one, I don't know if you thought I would ask about this one, but he talked about the fact that we have to be absolutely inclusive, but also exclusive.
Yeah.
So do you remember that comment?
I do. And I know, you talked about a few examples of like helping people find, if this isn't the right place for them, kind of helping them find their next place. Again, conceptually, I understand. I think in practice, that's really hard. Like that can be really hard. And so I was trying to think through like what that would look like in practice. I think it's one of the kindest things that you can do for someone. I really do, but not to say that it's easy.
Yeah, I can share, when he said that, I thought about, I could clearly see how it would work where somebody joins your team because they really think it's the place where they want to be. And all of a sudden you realize that there's just not a values match. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in a judgmental way whatsoever. One of the things I love to do is what I call a values exercise, where I pass out a tin with value words on the cards. And I say, and I did it with my wife one time, and she said, "This is so hard." I said, "Take this list of cards and put the ones that you really absolutely need to hold in one pile and the ones you can kind of discard in another pile." So for instance, family versus fun. Okay. If I'm going to narrow it down, family has to come before fun, right? For me, because I have a family. Now, you just talked about where you are in life determines those values. What happens is you actually take that deck, so you divide it in half, and I think there's 50 cards, so you divide it to 25. Then I say divide it down to 10, then go to 5, then go to 3. What are your 3 core values? Now, if an organization does the same thing as an organization, maybe they get down to 5 or 6, let's say. If somebody just doesn't buy into that, they're not going to be happy being there. For instance, if one of our member companies has a core value that is learn and grow. So they're going to expect all the employees that are there to be learning and growing all the time. I happen to support that value. I'm sure you're not surprised by that. But if somebody just wants to coast and they're done, that's not the place for them to work.
Yeah.
So rather than have them be miserable, you can coach them to leave. And I think my most successful scenario was having a person that just didn't. There were days when they seemed to be having a lot of fun and other days when they just were not having fun. And I asked them, "Are you having fun?" And they kind of looked away. And I said, "I want you to enjoy what you do. And if this isn't it, tell me what it is you love to do, and I'll help you get there." And so rather than going down a path where performance would have suffered and I would have had to ask a person to leave, they left on their own. The relationship is intact. I truly value them as a person. I value the decision they made. They're happy, and that's my goal. And it gives us opportunities in the organization where you're at to find somebody that might really love what that other person really didn't love. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not nobody failed. Somebody just moved to something that's more in line with what they enjoy.
Yeah, so I think that I think the key to it though too is that like the company has to be really clear on what their values are, right? Because
absolutely,
if you're not, I think, and you just say like, maybe it's someone who's not a good fit, it's really hard to figure out why, and then to help them find that better fit, or for the company to find the next fit. If you're not clear on what those values are,
right?
You can't just be, "I just didn't feel right." It's like, well, then it might never, it might never feel right.
Right. Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point there. Companies absolutely have to develop their value statements. Why do they exist? The why. Simon Sinek would call it a why, and maybe the values fit more into the how. But once you know why you do what you do, okay, how do we do it? That's our values. This is what we really hold true. The Ascend to Servant Leadership program, which is and I don't mean this to be a marketing thing, but that one-day workshop, you literally build out what are the values that I really would like for my organization. or your family. Which we've, when I did my growth training, I start out with, what are your core values? And now you build your growth plan around your values so that you're going to be the happiest. So there was, and I realize we're almost out of time. There was one more point that he made when he was talking about how to connect with Gen Zs. He made this statement: you connect at the heart level. And again, I think that really needs to fit to all the generations.
Yeah, I think if you do that with anyone, you can be successful.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think that's what everyone's looking for.
That we're all just looking for a heart connection. And I think successful leaders understand it. And it's that, people have heard me say it for years now. Once you sign up for leadership, it's no longer about you. It's about the other person. And if we as leaders, if we understand that our role is to help meet the needs of our team, help them grow, help them develop, everything else gets easier. We do away with our attendance issues, our engagement issues. Innovation starts to flourish. People aren't going to be jumping ship to go somewhere else for a few dollars more a month because we've made this connection. We've touched the heart before we've asked for the hand. And I just think that's the secret sauce, so to speak. Do you think there's anything we missed on this Generations in the Workplace conversation?
Oh, I'm sure we did.
So we're going to come back to this in a few months, or who knows?
I'm sure that like I said, there are so many factors that I think influence this conversation that it would be tough to cover in one sitting in
one episode. Yeah,
but
So if I were to ask you, what's the key? If you were to come up with a key takeaway of how do I relate with generations, what would it be?
Just one key. I think just to step back and think about the person you're interacting with and what their stance is. What their life stance or their phase of life, or and I think generations obviously play a big role into that.
Yep.
But to also not like stereotype or generalize, but to just use it as a way to like gather information, right? I think that's from an analytical standpoint, if you're just collecting information and gathering, it really can help you understand someone and why they might say or do certain things.
Yep, exactly. And I think if I agree with everything you said, and I think the other thing I would just add, and maybe it's the same thing, just value the person. And if you value them, you're naturally going to want to help them flourish and meet them where they are. Awesome. Do you have any exciting plans coming up?
I'm just really enjoying and it's like funny because it's not even summer yet, but I'm really enjoying being outside more, and I'm so excited that it's still only like early to mid-June at the time of recording this.
Yes.
And I've been doing so much like yard work and gardening, which I didn't get to do much last year. So that's just been really fun for me, and I'm looking forward to doing more of it. How about you?
Awesome. So actually, in a couple weeks, I'm going to be on vacation.
Yes.
Going back to the lake, spending time with my kids and grandkids. Just enjoying it. I still have not gotten out on the boat yet, believe it or not. I've been building a play set. We bought a new play set for my grandkids, and it is like, it ended up, a little project became a major project because I had to build the foundation for it so the drainage is right.
Wow.
And so I'm getting close. I might actually be hanging swings later today. We'll see.
That's exciting.
But it's all great. Can't wait to see. And the grandkids keep saying, "Papa, is the play set done yet?" No, not yet. But maybe by the next time they all show up, it will be. And our next episode that comes out in 2 weeks will be my conversation with Sports Illustrated Associate Editor Don Yeager.
Awesome.
It's awesome. one of the best storytellers I've ever heard.
Okay.
So I hope folks will join us in a couple weeks.
Looking forward to listening.
Another great conversation with Marisa. I just love the different perspectives that she brought to the topic. Thanks for listening to the Navigating Leadership podcast, and I look forward to you joining us in a couple of weeks.